Roosevelt once said, women, whether subtly or vociferously, have always been a tremendous power in the destiny of the world. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Rising Her Radio. Here's a podcast that unpacks what it takes to truly empower wealthy women and women leaders. It is said that women in Asia will hold about $27 trillion in wealth by 2026. At the end of 2021, women's combined wealth in Asia was said to have overtaken that of Western Europe. Plus, India is said to be home to the fifth highest number of billionaires in the world. Now more than ever, India's wealthy women are making their mark, breaking barriers, and setting new standards of excellence. So, what does it take to arm influential and wealthy women with ideas and knowledge to create generation of women leaders? How can women be empowered to make informed choices, protect their interests, and leverage their influence for the greater good? To explore the wealth management landscape for the wealthy women in India, please help me welcome Bijal, partner at Khaitan and Company, to unravel and break down these concepts for us. Bijal, it's my sheer pleasure and privilege to really have you on what is the inaugural episode of Rising Her Radio.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thanks, Bijal. We had you at the Rising Equality Summit and you spoke with such gusto and so much passion. And we also heard quite a few, I would say, women who have arrived in life, so to speak, in the financial services space, also open up on their challenges. It actually was unraveling for most of us on kind of the challenges those spoke about. I want to talk to you about financial independence specifically, that when one talks about financial independence for women, the kind of impression it connotes is perhaps women with lesser financial resources. But with someone like you, who is dabbling in the area of wealth management and talking to wealthy leaders from time to time, are there some new dimensions when it comes to wealth management, especially for wealthy women, which one perhaps doesn't know of?
So I strongly believe that financial independence is much more than being a working woman. That is being able to independently fend for yourself from a financial perspective. Financial independence denotes the ability to understand finances and take care of the finances of the family independently. If the need ever arises, a woman is innately well engineered not only to lead a family, but also to have the confidence to lead the finances of the family itself. More often than not, we see that a woman who really looks at succession planning with grace and dignity is more likely to succeed in creating a successful succession plan. Being financially independent provides the much needed security to a woman who is the bedrock to any family value. A woman who feels secure is more probable to raise a winning family. Very often, women feel incapable of handling the family finances and often push it off to her male family members. Statistically proven that women live longer than their male counterparts, and on demise of her life mate, she often is saddled with the responsibility to handle the family finances. And at times, she loses her confidence to manage the same due to the emotional drain, loss of a family member. Hence, it is extremely important for a woman to be able to handle finances way more independently than she ever has.
Thanks for that, Bijal. So, what are the steps that a woman can perhaps take to ensure that she knows she's well aware of the business, be it in terms of legacy or succession planning or something untoward were to happen? How can women sort of really empower herself in terms of some minute steps to be taken in that direction? And what could those really be?
I think it's really complex here, especially given the fact that we live in a social system where very often men do not really want to share their businesses or their finances with their women in itself. It's interesting to see that here you're really living your life and growing your family and relying on the women, more so than ever However, when it comes to just the finances of the family, her male counterpart very rarely actually wants her to be in the know. What I genuinely believe is that women who are given the opportunity to essentially help understand the finances of the business will be way more mature in the manner in which they are looking at the finances itself, on the spendings of the family, as well as looking at transition of the wealth. So, to that extent, having a woman be in a position to nurture the family and the men in itself, to essentially be free to share with them the finances of the family and to help organize themselves vis a vis how they would really look at the succession and transition of not only the wealth but also of the business in itself is extremely important. Statistics show that women who have been involved in the entire succession exercise, whether it means helping organize what the assets of the family are, what the liabilities are, how the business successor should essentially be defined, given the fact that women by nature are extremely organized, it often helps them in putting up a plan and leading it to a conclusion on how which will be best meant for the family in itself.
So having a woman pays off in the family decision. It's better for the business. Can one say that?
Absolutely.
Bijal, I also want to understand from you that this entire narrative of women wealth creators in Asia and basis the Forbes study that happened, as a lawyer, have you seen this evolution of wealth management for wealthy women in India and Asian women creators over the past decade? I mean, have you really seen the ushering of women wealth creators in Asia? I mean, are you seeing this on the ground for real?
Absolutely. I would feel that, the fact that women nowadays have been given the opportunity of a better education and the entire sense of being able to actually achieve has driven women themselves to actually become leaders, in the society of today. When we really see women, you see a trend of them really being able to successfully lead. And to that extent, a number of them have become entrepreneurs. And very interestingly so, women who were always considered not really very agile with finances, you actually see a large amount of women leaders be in the financial services arena itself. In fact, in India itself, when we see the number of wealth management outfits which are led by women, I would feel they're almost equal to those which are led by men itself. So there definitely is a rise in the number of women leaders as well as entrepreneurs really creating wealth, as well as an entire society of wealth creators in itself.
Now, which are sort of getting right down to sort of brass tacks, and I want to understand from you that what do you see as the opportunities for women in India that you think are not necessarily being spoken about when it comes to wealth management? Are there gender specific challenges they face?
Of course, there's always been the stereotype that, women and finances don't really go together. But the question which I really always ask is who really runs the home, who really runs the family? And to that extent, a woman who can, successfully run a family as well as a home, which really has emotions, egos, anger, a lot of love really flowing all about, it is not really very difficult for them to actually run the finances of a business also. Very often in business families, you would see women being more armed towards handling the philanthropic objective of the family itself and not really being involved in the business per se. However, we are now seeing a growing trend and a change in the system wherein, if at all a female member in a family shows promise as well as shows inclination, you are seeing matriarchs as well as patriarchs offering them an equal opportunity to really grow the business. But definitely, they do need to prove themselves much more, especially if it is a hard business which is being run. On the other side, if you're looking at a business which is more on the services front, having
Mhm.
women around and really looking at them really run it is much more easier, given the fact that you are looking at human resources being managed, which perhaps a woman may be much better at.
Thanks for that, Bijal. And Bijal, I also want to understand from you that in your interaction with a business family, do you categorically remember of an incident where you felt taken aback with a woman perhaps not having any idea about where the business is going, and you felt like, oh my God, what that is like, what is really happening? And perhaps there could also be a situation meeting with a business family where you said that they really are pushing women forward.
I would say, time and again, whenever we meet families, it's an absolute surprise to see women who are not at all aware of not only the wealth which the family has. So, often they underestimate the wealth which the family has, and at times they absolutely are clueless of the liabilities or the loans which the business has essentially taken. So, to that extent, it reminds me of an interesting situation where, you had like, the male, patriarch actually passed away. He was really running the business, leaving aside this young woman along with her children who were both minors. And when she was saddled with the responsibility of, running the business, one is she was not at all, or she did not really feel confident at all about it. But at the same time, the fact that she needed to really run the family business, given the fact that she had young children as a responsibility to be a caregiver to that extent, she actually equipped herself not only from an educational standpoint, so she actually went ahead, studied, took up degrees which would enable her to really run and understand the business. But also to that extent, she sat in negotiations on a sector which was absolutely not close to her heart. So, to that extent, it's very
My God.
interesting where, especially in family businesses, nowadays, which have more or less become nuclear. Gone are the days where you have large, joint family businesses. And to the extent that most families have gone nuclear, it is very important that for each of the family members, be it the husband, the wife, the children, whether it's a son or a daughter, to be absolutely involved in the business and to know as to, how is it to be run in a situation where the main person running the business is not in a position to do the same.
That's very well said. So, Bijal, in situations like this, what is your advice to a family in terms of the formation of a family trust? What should be the actual process to be sort of followed in terms of the knowledge transfer, the wherewithal? Should all the family members be equally involved? And the other kind of myth that if I'm 35 or I'm in my early 30s, I don't need to think of the will. Is that something which is a conversations about time that we must have more and more with our families? Do you think that?
I would definitely feel that, an open communication channel between family members vis-a-vis, the objectives which are trying to be achieved in any transition of wealth, as well as for that matter, being in a position to understand as to how the transition should be undertaken is extremely important. Now, at times, you may not really have every family member having the maturity to be able to digest the entire, discussion on wealth and its succession. And you often see, women being very emotional about certain strategic decisions. And to that extent, we always would advise the women that be bold, but at the same point in time, be absolutely fair when you're looking at the transition of the wealth and whether or not it means, protecting the wealth or for that matter, protecting the business in itself. There may be different structures which may be applied each of them. And to that extent, what we would generally prefer is to have all family members. But at the end of it, If at all the patriarch or the matriarch, as the case may be, believe that certain members may not really have the maturity, or they've never really been, in the know of certain things about the family or the finances or the business in itself, then in that situation, perhaps at a later stage, they may actually be educated about what is the succession plan. But however, I generally believe that it is extremely important for them to be aware of the plan which is being put in place. Because women who are clueless, especially when they lose their, male life partner, they become extremely insecure. And at times it leads to the destruction and erosion in the value of the business in itself. So it is important that they are aware. And the first step which should be taken when you are looking at creating any trust is firstly for the family to decide as to what is the objective which we are really trying to achieve. Is it an objective of just having a plain vanilla succession planning? Succession to wealth, succession to leadership, succession to control of the business? Or is it more vis a vis asset protection, wherein you do want to ensure that the assets of the family are absolutely protected from any downturn in the business? Or for that matter, situations of personal disharmony in the cases of matrimonial disputes, or it could just be cross border planning vis a vis inheritance taxes, given the fact that Indian families are globally located as well as have assets located around the world. So it is important, one, to have a clear communication channel. Second is to lay your objectives, and then to implement the plan which is being thought of so that it is successfully implemented, such that in any rainy day, you do have a plan which is being looked at, so that the family still remains afloat vis a vis a successful business.
Thanks for that, Bijal, and thank you so much for laying it out so beautifully. I also want to understand from you about the journey of a woman, right? The sort of life changing moments that happen. Of course, one is marriage, then you becoming a mother. Then, in some unfortunate situations, there could also be a marital discord, like you said. There could be a situation where a divorce happens, or you lose your life partner. There could be a significant career shift. So, also for some of the career oriented women, how does one sort of make sure that women are an integral part of the wealth management journey of a family construct per se, or between two people? I mean, how can women have that psyche from the very beginning that I have to get involved in the wealth management conversation? Is that even there? One doesn't really know.
So I would definitely feel that, when you are a young girl, you are really the biggest risk taker because you really don't know what it is to actually lose something, right? And, to the extent that as a young child in itself, where you are taught how to really grow money as well as to save money, and more importantly, how to really be a smart spender, to that extent, when it starts from that from that age in itself, it is a very biological process for the woman to innately believe that yes, I can really do it. Now, to the extent that a person has been kept clueless, and suddenly you are married, and you've always had pre-marriage your father or your brother really looking after your finances, and later on, very easily, you actually give it off to your husband or your father-in-law. To that extent, the woman is never feeling confident that she can actually handle it herself. So, from a very young age, when you have an induction and an initiation into it, it becomes a far more easier and a seamless process. And to that extent, whether it means just handling simple pocket money or having your savings of your pocket money say invested into the markets, wherein you'll actually be reading about companies, the how the economy is looking at, from that perspective itself, it does give the woman a lot of security that yes, I can actually believe, I can actually believe in myself, and I am very capable of managing finances. So, to that extent, overall, I would always feel that when it really starts at a young age, it is much more easier to transition, through being, a wife, then, of course, to being a mother, and so on and so forth.
Thanks for that, Bijal. On that, we're talking about women and her journey, the life changing moments. I also have to ask you that, okay, we make our money, and that 30 to 40 is very right for wealth creation. Most of us have our biggest career progressions in that time frame. Okay, we have made our money, but what is the right time to think about retirement, for instance? It doesn't even come in our psyche. And it's so sad because women tend to live longer than men, statistically proven. And second, men tend to earn more than women. Like women earn about 80 cents to a dollar in the US for every sort of transaction that you see at the kind of level you say. So statistically, there are such three or four large compelling reasons for women to become better wealth creators for themselves. So I want to understand from you that when does one really even start thinking about retirement planning? And even wealthy women, are they even thinking about that in the right direction, the way they should think about it?
I feel as Indians per se, we have it in our blood to actually be the biggest savers. So we do like to always save for a rainy day. And to that extent, very rarely will you see, a woman actually being a spendthrift and really being, spending much more that she really has in her bank account. So to that extent, when you're really looking at, retirement, and I would feel that it's not only retirement, I would feel it's also a situation where you may just choose that you actually want to, take a small break from your career and actually just have that pot of money which is going to transgress you through those times. I feel it is important that in any paycheck which a woman really gets, there is some amount which is kept aside for her, savings, so that she is in a position to invest it. And whether it's an investment in, say, debt or an equity, or for that matter, some social causes which she's really passionate about, it is important that from a very young age, the savings mindset, which may help you in a rainy day, or for that matter, when you just want that extra buck, or in a situation where your husband's business is actually in a downturn, or for that matter in retirement, as you rightly said, that women do tend to live longer than their spouses. In any of those life situations, those savings will actually be the most useful. And to that extent, saving for a retirement, I would say, should start from your first paycheck in itself.
Talking about the family offices, because I wanted to understand more about business families. How do they talk about wealth? What is their outlook towards wealth creation and wealth management? I'm very, very curious to know that. Is it more inclined towards philanthropy? Is it more inclined towards succession planning? Okay, passing the baton from one person to sort of another. Is it keeping the wealth creation internally? What are the kind of conversations that you have with the heads of these family businesses?
I would say it's, ranging. I mean, one is, of course, you've worked so hard to create that wealth. And very often, families don't work as hard to really create a transition plan. And when I talk about transition, it's not only a question about transition of the wealth itself, but really transition of the leadership in an organization or the family business itself. Now, when you're really looking at, any of these plannings, the planning really starts with, of course, a plain vanilla succession, thinking that, oh, I saw my ancestors really having issues and I don't really want the family wealth to be diminished. And it may really start at the stage of just pure wealth succession. However, it is very important for us to actually educate them of the fact that person who may actually be a wealth owner may not necessarily be the best wealth manager, or for that matter, the best person who can actually lead an organization in itself. And to that extent, important for families to really have those concepts clear and to compartmentalize the wealth succession with the leadership succession and the control and management succession in itself. More often than not, succession is one part of it. The second is asset protection. And asset protection could come about because of any unforeseen liability in a business. It could come about because of, say, a fire in, say, a cinema hall, right? Wherein an owner is actually pulled into an entire criminal investigation as to whether you did have your security in place to ensure that such accidents do not take place.
Yeah, yeah.
Or for that matter, it could be just personal situations like a divorce in the family. Say, a son or a daughter is getting divorced, and the entire family is actually pulled into an emotional drain, and to that extent, ensuring that the wealth is absolutely protected, it does actually give you the confidence as well as the courage to deal with this emotional setback in any personal life. So I would say one part of it is just pure succession. The second would be asset protection. The third would really be wealth generation. You do need to ensure that the money which you have earned is now actually working for you. You should not really be working for the money itself. Make your money in itself work. And to that extent, whether it means having family offices, having people of expertise, on the private equity side, on the, on just hedge fund investing style, on real estate investing, we've seen families having a bucket of various situations of investing rather than putting in all their eggs in one basket in following just one investment strategy in itself. Also, what we have seen is that families now plan a lot with respect to social impact investing. And to
Mm-hmm.
that extent, whether it is purely investing or it is really running a cause which is very, very close to the heart of family members, that is also something which we do see families being extremely structured about on how they really want to actually look at any sort of impact investing. There was a time when, for most families, it would be an individual family member who would be looking at any of these social causes. But we have seen a change wherein families really look at this entire charity endeavor as good as they are looking at their business in itself. So
Wow.
they would employ professionals to really run it. And situations where professionals are actually running these particular endeavors are more often than not likely to be successful, given the fact that you do have independence of that particular person who's running it, as well as there is no conflict of interest. Otherwise, very often you will see that the person or the family member who's running that initiative wants his or her name, splattered all across in any of those charity initiatives. So I would say succession on the one hand, asset protection, and ensuring your family office is really growing the wealth, as well as philanthropy, are different segments which families are really talking about whenever they come to meet us.
So it's a very interesting conversation that you have with families, right? You are actually becoming a very important and integral part of how they are charting out their personal journeys also. So it must be the job of a very trusted advisor, Bijal, because you are advising them on nuances, on even branding, what to be conscious of, what not to be conscious of, keeping in mind the interest of all the parties. So there must also be pleasant as well as unpleasant conversations. But over the time, you build that relationship of being that trusted maven, right? It's a very, very trust based relationship, is what I'm gathering.
You're absolutely right. I would say that, what we really do when we are advising families in this particular space is as good as your medical general practitioner. So you have your general practitioner who you would go for any sort of a medical issue. And he's the one who's going to be your point person who's going to navigate your entire health for you. In a similar fashion, we would be, say, the wealth doctors, taking care of ensuring that any sort of an issue which they face from a family perspective or from that perspective, from an organization side, to help them navigating those legal issues Often we are entrusted with situations, to explain to the family as to why what has been done. And it may be nothing to do with law, nothing to do with taxes, nothing to do with, handling wealth. It may just really be to handle emotions of family members. And that is something which we have seen, that the ability to really balance emotions as well as advice really makes you the winning advisor.
Yeah, emotions and advice. On that note, I have to ask you a question. This entire narrative on succession planning, especially, what if, and I've seen that in business families in India, especially, that if you don't have sons and you have a daughter, and one is struck with that situation, and so what really happens in those scenarios? Because we are in a country where there's a massive Jamai culture, the reverence towards the male member, right? And so I want to understand from you that do the conversations differ when there's a successor is a daughter versus a successor is a male? And the second situation, what if the younger generation is not so apt or keen to take on the reins of the family business? So what happens in those situations? And does that become a very difficult conversation to have?
I would say there has been a sea change in the thinking that, business succession is only meant for the son and not for the daughter. And we've seen many situations where you have families only having daughters, and those daughters have taken active interest in running the organization itself. So, to that extent, though, traditionally speaking, from a very conservative standpoint, it is absolutely a given that yes, I have a son and he's going to run the business. It may not equally apply when you have a daughter. So, to that extent, it is the daughter who would have to showcase the interest and the inclination to be able to actually manage the business. But definitely situations where a daughter is showcasing that interest, that inclination, they are actually being the successes to business. We have interestingly seen situations where there is a son and a daughter. The son is not as geared towards handling the family business. The daughter is actually given the reins to run it, not only from the perspective of the business itself, and may also be actually handling the entire philanthropy, objectives of the family. And the son may just be someone who's actually, more like a trust fund baby. So, to that extent, we have seen those situations change. Cases where none of the children are interested in running the family business. There was a time where traditionally families saw that as a real social stigma and a shame that the children have not entered the family business. However, now we see that as a change wherein matriarchs as well as patriarchs believe that if our children are not interested in our traditional family business and may be more interested in something which is more new age, or for that matter, doing only social impact investing, then to that extent, we rather monetize the family business,
Mhm.
make a family office out of it, such that you have professionals running that particular family office, and your children are in a position to actually follow their dreams, whether it means on impact investing or creating an absolutely new business.
We
What we
can have a
must
separate,
always
yeah, we can have a separate podcast only on Indian family businesses, because I can see a sea change and generational shifts in perceptions and attitudes of family businesses towards just how they look and perceive at wealth. Like you mentioned that Shrija, women, if they are the center of the wealth creation journey or the wealth management journey, they're more inclined towards philanthropic activities. There's so much to talk to you, Bijal. I also want to understand from you, just getting towards the last of the conversation. So there is a seismic shift. There are women wealth creators happening. Asia is rising, especially when it comes to women taking power of more and more wealth. What really are your three or four key pieces of advice or takeaways that you have for these women wealth creators? An advice which you wish you had when you were in your 20s or younger, which you are seeing in this decade of India's run. which is unprecedented, the kind of wealth creation that we are seeing. I mean, you look at the unicorn obsession that we have, and like you rightly mentioned, that Shrija, there are businesses who are looking at philanthropy and impact investing in such a way. Because if I were to look at Asia and India in particular, there are two shifts which are extremely clear. One is the ascent of women as leaders, and second, really, is a shift from, I would say, shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism, right? Where companies are increasingly becoming cognizant, and the entire change and the meaning of capitalism is happening at a very, very ground level. So these are two biggest observations like I've had. But from someone like you, like who is really dabbling in the area of wealth creation, maybe women could be very good wealth creators, but are they really thinking in the same direction about managing their wealth, or family wealth, or finances, or being met with untoward incidents? What could be one or two key pieces of your advice or trends or observations for women listening to this podcast?
I would definitely feel that, the teens which we have of today, the girls are extremely smart and well geared to actually be independent women. Now, when you're really looking at, I would say, the one advice which I would always give is one is just believe in yourself. As a woman, you are such a high level of a multitasker and also someone who does want to keep the family together, as a result of which, in a case where a woman is really, putting a heart and mind to the fact that, yes, I can also be a wealth creator, to that extent, the objective behind which that wealth creation is essentially undertaken, it will have more of an objective of a social bent as well as of keeping the family together rather than just economic returns. So to that extent, it is important for women to really believe in themselves and be given the confidence that yes, they do have an equal standing as any male or as their brothers in the society, and to that extent the sky is the limit for anything which they would like to achieve too.
Great. So, Bijal, it's time for the rapid fire, and I have some 5 questions for you, and you can give me some quick answers. What is the first thing every woman should do after an inheritance?
I would say the first thing would be perhaps to actually keep some money aside for a rainy day.
Okay. Do you have a go to financial tool or an app?
No,
So, you just manage it all yourself mentally. No financial tool or wealth app, nothing.
no. So I genuinely believe in there being experts around. So we do have like, good experts who are actually guiding us. And then of course we do undertake some monthly reviews of the same.
Great. If you were to go on like a lunch date with a woman whom you like, you feel very, very overawed with, or you feel inspired, who would that be? Just like a lunch conversation, two women, who would that be?
So my first one would definitely be Indira Nui. I mean, she's been super inspirational, and I've read her book, and I feel there's so much, and she's written it straight from her heart, wherein you realize that somebody of her stature also has had the same issues which any of us really have. So I would definitely feel she would be one of them, I mean, she would be definitely my number one. And if I could really look back, perhaps someone like a Mother Teresa, to just understand that how you can really give your whole entire self for just a social cause.
Great. Your advice to women startup founders, what would that really be?
I would definitely say make your house in order. It's taken a lot for you really to be out there to be a founder, and to that extent, when I say make your house in order, very often I see that women not really taking those active steps in managing their own wealth. They're great at managing their family wealth, but not necessarily their own wealth. So I would say that, do begin with that planning at the start itself.
Thank you so much, Bijal. And my last question to you, if you could speak to a younger version of yourself just starting out in law, what financial wisdom or a career wisdom would you impart to yourself?
It's a difficult one. I would think I would definitely feel that, one just ride with the wave. Often we over engineer, life, or we over engineer what we really, feel it should be there. But often there is so much which is, which just really takes place in the normal course, and we do really stress about certain situations so much, it's really not really required. And I do feel as a woman, we feel so responsible for our families as well as for our teams when we are actually leading teams. If we just really go with the normal course, we may just be happier versions of ourselves.
Think like a man, fundraise like a man.
Absolutely.
So, Bijan, I can't let go of you without you talking about the KCO Arise initiative coming from a law firm, which is India's oldest law firm. I have to sort of give it to you all to really think of it in such a organized direction and really making something which is not a one-off but a year-long initiative. So, what is it really, and what was the inspiration behind it, and why do you think it is very, very important for law firms to really come forward, not only as knowledge creators, but also setting standards for equality?
Oh, absolutely. So, this is, an initiative which is, which our firm has really undertaken, from, not only something which we would like to do on a year basis, but really something which is, a part of the essence of our organization in itself. And when we talk about diversity, we are not only talking about gender diversity, but all forms of diversity in itself. It is extremely important for us to embrace diversity because it does really add a lot of value to an organization, not only in the development of hard skills, but soft skills, which really add so much to any leader in itself. It really started off for us to really have way more women leaders. And of course, it transgressed into many other areas of diversity and inclusion. And what we have really seen is that, when you have a woman as a leader, there is a lot of compassion, empathy with which she's in a position to actually lead a team. She is more often than not a go getter in herself, absolutely disciplined. And to that extent, all of that really forces you to move towards having initiatives which actually educate people on diversity and inclusion, because it really starts from the absolute bottom and it moves to the top. So if you're initiated into diversity and inclusion at a younger age, it is way more easier for you to adapt, to actually take home, to help your family in itself, think of matters differently, whether you're a man or you're a woman. Second most important is that it is for any of these initiatives to be successful, your leaders or your senior managers in an organization do absolutely need to believe in themselves, believe in it, as well as live in itself. So, to that extent, when it really comes from the top that this is important for the organization itself, it really translates and transgresses into the younger generation. So it's something which is very, very interesting. We must be having, an event on Arise at least once a month, whether it just means a circle time, whether it means getting young women to really share their experience where they are really facing hurdles, really to look at situations of whether we are talking about transgenders, etc. From all those perspectives, it becomes extremely important. I would definitely see as a country, we are really making a lot of headway. We are not really far behind when we are looking at, any of the developed countries too. And to that extent, if it is something which, each organization really does adapt to well and really truly believes in it, we really see a very different India from what we see today.
Thank you so much, Bichan, and I wish you all the best for your RISE initiative. I think it's coming along really well. I have gone through the page and seen some of the podcasts too. Thank you so much, Bijal, for joining in. And what a lovely conversation, starting from women to family offices to diversity and where the women wealth creators of Asia are headed. Thank you. And we should have more of you in this podcast because there's so much to talk about, be it family businesses, be it startup founders, unicorn obsession, and so on and so forth. So, till time I see you next, goodbye and good luck. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you.